introducing you, if I may. Excuse the fact that for those of you who are wondering, so like what the blue sash is, I've just come out of shoulder surgery, so I'm sort of leaning more to one side than the other. So it takes me a little bit longer to get around to doing the stuff that would normally take me a little bit longer. So in terms of introductions from myself, my name is David Munn-Jones. I am the Chief Executive Officer or Chief Operating Officer, depending upon which title I choose at the time, for the International Authority for Professional Coaching and Mentoring, or the IAPC&M. And for those of you who equally don't know, we are one of the oldest established accrediting bodies for coaches, mentors, and training providers. It's my absolute great pleasure today to be able to introduce Nate. I've known Nate for quite some while through my exposure to the process communication model. And I'm just going to read a little bit of Nate's biography. Nate has a PhD. He is the CEO and founding owner of Next Element Consulting, which is a global leadership firm dedicated to bringing compassion into the workplace. Nate is a former practicing psychologist and expert in social emotional intelligence, interpersonal communication, and leadership. Recognized as a top 100 keynote speaker, he's a process communication model certifying master trainer. Nate is the author of 3 books, Beyond Drama, Transcending Energy Vampires, Conflict Without Casualties, a field guide for leadership with compassionate accountability, and his newest book, Seeing People Through, for which I've got a copy here, which is all about leadership with, unleashing your leadership potential with the process communication model. He hosts a regular podcast called On Compassion with Dr. Nate, writes a weekly blog, contributes to multiple industry publications and blogs, and is a regular guest on podcasts. And a little bit of information that you might not know, and certainly I didn't know, is that Nate is part of a competition barbecue team. They are called 3 Men and a Butt, if I've read that correctly. Pork shoulder or pork rump roast is one of the 4 meat categories in most professional contests. So I'm well impressed. Anything to do with meat, I'm well impressed with. So thank you very much for that. Nate, I'm going to leave you to introduce anything that I've missed, and also introduce your topic, so like in the way that you would prefer to introduce it, rather than me just giving it a title. So Nate, the floor is yours.
Well, thank you. Thank you very much. And welcome everyone here. I'm glad we can all see each other. And you might be hearing a train in the background. I'm broadcasting from a train station. And so if you hear that, those of you that are from the Midwest of America, some people think it's romantic to hear that train in the background. But unlike Europe, the trains here don't come on time, and you never know when they're going to show up. And they're not very dependable. So having traveled in Switzerland, I know what a dependable train looks like. So great to be here. And I would love it if you can access the chat. I'd love to know where you are and who I'm talking to, or where I'm talking to. I can see your names on there, and I'm coming from Kansas here in America. And David, when you said you're leaning a little bit to the left, I hope that wasn't a political commentary.
No, and bearing in mind everything that you have gone through and are currently going through in the state, I didn't want that to come across as either political, and nor did I want the blue sash to infer that I was either a Democrat or Republican.
Oh, well, I'm sure everyone has been watching America with a lot of interest lately, but we're all still here. We're still fine. COVID cases are spiking in our neighborhood, and so there's a lot more hunkering down going on now. Anyways, yeah, I'm Nate Regier. I'm great to be here, or really excited to be here in this opportunity to talk about the process communication model and how it relates to leadership. There are some topics that you may have seen in the kind of the learning objectives for today that I would like to talk about, but I also would like this to be a conversation. I don't have formal slides prepared. I don't want to overstructure this. So I might start some conversation around a few things and then let you all weigh in and see what's interesting to you. I'm curious, first of all, by show of hands here, how many of you are familiar with the process communication model? All right, fantastic. Well, that gives me a great idea about where to start. Um, and so the process communication model, I'll share a little bit more about this. It's a behavioral model of communication and personality, but I did not discover or was introduced to this model until well into my professional career as a clinical psychologist. And I had studied all the models and all the frameworks and all the methodologies and the tests and assessments. And when I was introduced to PCM for the first time in my life, it explained some things about me and the things I had struggled with that I never understood before. And not only that, but it gave me tools to take more personal responsibility over me, how I was built and how I related to people. And so many things made sense finally. And so I couldn't get enough after that and went on to become a trainer and then studied with the originator of the model, Dr. Taby Kaler, to become a master trainer and a certifying master trainer. About 15 years ago, I was sitting on my front porch after work with my wife, Julie, and she is a clinical social worker by background, by training, and she does a lot of work with children, particularly a lot of work with at-risk youth. And I was doing a lot of clinical psychology work with mental health, mental illness, and we had a lot of conversations about the different models and frameworks and how we understood behavior. And we also had three young children at the time, one baby. And my wife said to me, she said, you know, we talk a lot about this PCM model and you seem pretty excited about it. If you had to pick a toolkit for your life, and it could either be all of your clinical psychology training or PCM, and you had to choose one, which would you pick? And I didn't even have to think about it. Without question, if I had to choose, I would take PCM as the toolkit for my life. Much more practical and useful on a daily basis than everything I learned in my clinical psychology professional training. And that's not to say that I don't value my training. It's just to say that PCM is that good and has been that useful for me. And so I continued to study and started Next Element, founded Next Element in 2008, and process communication model leadership training was the foundation of our work. And our company grew and grew, and we continued to evolve that until we are now one of several distributors of the model in the US. But I always wanted to write a book. Always wanted to write a book because I felt like this model is very sophisticated. It's rich. It's very rich. And David, as you know, people can study for many, many, many years to become proficient in this. But I wanted to make it accessible to anyone, anywhere. And I have a particular interest in leadership. And so for many years, I wanted to write a book about PCM and leadership, but I never quite knew when the right time was going to be. And about 10 years ago, one of my colleagues, Jamie Remsburg, she was in Michigan doing marathon leadership training with a school district. And it was one of those situations, I don't know how many of you here do professional training or consulting. I'm just curious. Yeah, okay. Well, I'm going to pause time out there. I'm curious, Claz, what do you do?
So I am qualified maybe just under 2 years ago in life coaching and more recently in career coaching. I have headed up departments in my old jobs in the past, but at the moment I don't have any clients who are leaders, and I don't feel like I have the kind of executive coaching experience. But I'm very, very interested in different personality models because I do a lot of that, you know, sort of stuff with my clients.
Yeah. Thank you. That's great. How about you, Helen?
Hi. So I've recently left a corporate job to start a self-employed coaching practice, and I also use personality assessment. So I'm interested.
Great. Great. Okay. And the other person, I don't see your name on the screen. Are you willing to introduce yourself and share a little bit about what you do?
Yeah,
Is
I'm
that
Des
Desmond?
Howitt.
Hey,
Yeah,
Des.
Desmond Howitt. Yeah, I'm in Dublin in Ireland. How are you?
Hi. Welcome.
You could say I'm a career marketeer who has discovered towards the latter half of his career the joy of coaching. So I'm quite new to it, and I just did a few courses last year, and I'm just getting my feet under the table, so to speak, and practicing with it at the moment by doing some voluntary coaching, primarily career coaching. So that's where I'm at.
Wonderful. Wonderful. Thank you all for sharing. It's great to have you and to know a little bit about your context. So back to my story. Jamie was doing a marathon training session, working with about 40 or 50 leaders, running them through a 3-day course. But she was running one group after another through day 1. And then the next week she would run all these groups through day 2. And it felt like there's a movie here in the States called Groundhog Day. And it's about how you just wake up and it's the same every single day. And she was feeling tired and drained. And she loves to be with her family. And so the weekend came and she wasn't coming home to Kansas. She had to stay in a hotel for the weekend. She was feeling tired and drained and kind of lonely. And also kind of in that place when, you know how people learn about a model and then they know just enough to be dangerous? And everyone thinks they understand what's going on. They're throwing labels around and starting to act like they know what's going on, and they're really causing trouble. That's about where things were. And she was feeling discouraged. She went out for Chinese food. And when she received her ticket with the fortune cookie, she opened up her fortune cookie, and inside the message said, "The purpose is not to see through people. The purpose is to see people through." And in that moment, she realized, this is why I do what I do. This is why I get up every day. This is why we train PCM. Because the process communication model isn't a model to figure people out and to see through them and have some secret technique for manipulating them. It's a tool to see them through to their potential, through to everything that they can be. It's a tool for communicating with them in a way that they want to be communicated with. It's a tool for maximizing and appreciating the vast potential in everyone's personality. So she got up Monday morning with new hope, and she went back and finished her training, and she brought that fortune cookie home, and she showed it to me, and she told me the story. And I said, Jamie, that will be the title of the book. That was 8 years ago. And now the book is out, and it's called Seeing People Through. And our publisher didn't want that title. They said that we don't really understand that. We would need to do focus groups on the title. And we said, no, that will be the title of the book, because that is what PCM is all about. So it's been personally transformative for me. It's been a labor of love, a journey of self-discovery, a journey of, I mean, as David knows, working with people with PCM is so rewarding because of the transformation that occurs. That is really exciting. So that's my background. That's about how the book came to be. I haven't told you anything about PCM yet, but I hope you know a little bit more about me and my passion and why we're here talking about the book. I'm curious if you have any questions or comments about anything I've said so far. I'll just stop here. All right. Well, it's okay anytime to raise your hand or put something in the chat. We're a good intimate group, so we can do that. Well, thank you. Well, so there's 3 topics I wanted to talk about or have a conversation about today. And the first one has to do with the problem with most personality models. And we're all familiar with different types of personality models, and there's many out there. Ones I'm most familiar with in the US are DISC, StrengthsFinder, PI. Oh, David, what are some of the more popular ones in Europe where you're working?
Myers-Briggs, MBTI.
Yeah.
Tends to come up a lot. The OPQ from what was Savile, well, what was then, wasn't then, is now again. So like Savile assessment, 16PF is probably sort of like one of the other ones. The I keep forgetting what it's called. The Hogan personality.
Yep.
Personality style. And then you've got so like the team ones, so like the Belbin ones and things of that nature.
Yeah. So there's a lot out there, a lot of different, it's very popular to assess personality or assess temperament or assess styles. And there's good reason why we like that. We want to be able to anticipate how someone functions and what they prefer so that we can maybe tailor jobs better to fit them or help appreciate differences and have more tolerance for differences. But over the years, I've noticed several really big problems. And some of the problems are with the tools themselves. Some of the problems are with how we use them. So I want to speak first to the problems with how we use these tools. And this is captured in the first chapter of my book called Hypocrisy. And it's about the main character, Kayla, is discovering that we don't practice what we preach. And she experiences one of the main problems with personality assessments is that they are brought in with what seems to be good intentions, like, oh, we want to increase tolerance, or we all want to understand our team better so we can work better together. So everybody has to go take this test, and then not much happens after that. Maybe maybe you get a report back, or maybe there's a debrief, a 1-hour luncheon debrief, or sometimes even less than that. And people learn just enough to be dangerous. And very often we learn just enough to be looking to our left and looking to our right. And now we have labels. Oh, you're a high D, or you're an introvert, or you're a ENTJ. And we start calling people these random words and phrases, or, oh, you're an owl, or you're really red on your profile, like we think we know them. And the big problem with this is as soon as we think we know somebody, we stop listening to them. We stop hearing them. We stop truly observing behavior and really communicating with someone. And so I call it hiding behind the label. And we start to think that, or I've even heard people use it as an entitlement program by saying something like, well, I'm an introvert, so nobody talk to me before lunch. Or, I'm this, so therefore I get all of these special treatments because now you know my personality. And I never understood that. I thought that when I learned something about myself, I could be more responsible for who I am, more responsible for my behavior, not less responsible. And so that's one of the main problems that I've seen is people use these labels to put people in boxes and really kind of start to oversimplify what it really means to have differences. I'm curious your take on that, or what's been your experience?
I would certainly agree. I was at a presentation sort of like years and years, long before I got more into sort of like personality assessment, and somebody was talking about the sort of like Belbin team roles, and they said exactly that. They said that the profile, so I can working this out, is great, but what you don't want to be doing is stereotyping or pigeonholing people. Yeah. The problem of which is that when something looks like it's got high authority attached to it, and somebody says, oh well, you must be X, Y, Z, all of a sudden you go, well, yeah, I accept I shouldn't be pigeonholed or stereotyped, but clearly I must be X, Y, Z because that's what that's what this profile says, therefore. And I think from my own experience, especially when you have executives or leaders who've been through a number of different personality, so like profiles or 360-degree feedback tools, one of the things that they tend to get is, oh, you're like, it's just another, you know, another personality tool. And I think you're right. The follow up, you know, at best people might get a feedback session. At worst, they just get the report in the post. But in a lot of organizations, it's only the people who are trained to administer that will do the feedback. Or sort of the managers, the leaders themselves just aren't involved in the process. So nobody brings them along. Nobody has the ongoing, you know, the ongoing conversation. And I think so. Like it, just referencing back to your book, The Hypocrisy. When I first read that, I remember thinking, you know what, that is so true of so many organizations, yeah, that I've been in.
Yeah.
So that would certainly be my sort of like my experience as well. And that would be the same
Thank
with
you.
a number of emotional intelligence
Oh, sure.
profiles that, although they tend to be sort of like quite wide ranging, they almost say, well, you know, you either are or you're not emotional intelligent, rather than saying, well, look, everybody has this, you're just using it in, you know, like in different ways.
Sure. Sure. Any others? What has been your experience?
Similar experience. So in my previous role, we used particularly one personality assessment, and people were kind of striving to be the same colours as the leaders because they assumed that that was a good thing. And also using colours to excuse their behaviour or explain their behaviour. So like for me, I was the only person who facilitated the assessment, and my questions would always be, when people wanted to have an assessment, I'd be like, what are you going to use it for? You know, like, and if people would say, I want to know what colour I am, I'd say, well, I'm not doing it then, because that's not enough. The whole thing for me about personality assessments is they enable respectful communication, and they are just one element of how we are made up the way that we are. I mean, it's a useful tool, but it, like you say, absolutely depends on how you use it.
Yeah, thank you. And thank you for your responsibility in using the tool in the right way. That's what we need more of. Yeah.
Nate, I'm just really curious about the model. Like what is the differentiator of the process communication model? You'll have to forgive me. I'm totally ignorant about it.
Absolutely. I will give you all the specifics about that. Yes. And those specifics, I will tell you about the model when I share with you some of how the problem with models themselves and how PCM overcomes those problems, or how it's different. So thank you for that. Absolutely. Well, so I think we can agree that personality is not an entitlement program. And the learning about that the purpose of a good model, I'm putting this in the chat, is to change our mind about someone, not to make it up. If we use models to make up our mind, then we're getting confused between the map and the terrain. And the map is not the terrain. And my daughter gets confused because she's driving, staring at her GPS on her phone, thinking that that's real. And meanwhile, she's missing the road signs, the trees, everything that would tell her where she actually is, because she thinks the map is the actual terrain. And that's a mistake we make with models very often. So PCM is a framework for actually revealing the terrain and giving us observable behaviors to detect, connect with, and motivate with different personality types. So PCM is one of the only models I know of that is based on observable behavior. It was developed by observing behavior and mathematically coding it into patterns. And so it was developed by a psychologist, Dr. Tavi Kaler, and I can relate to psychological training is about how do you observe and quantify behavior. That's the whole kind of methodology of psychology. And what he noticed is that by watching hundreds and hundreds of hours of videotaped behavior of people that were in a good space and also miscommunicating and in distress, he noticed very observable clusters of behavior that happened over and over and over. And he was able to mathematically discern through factor analysis and correlations 6 distinct patterns of behavior that are all observable through how we speak. So it's called the process communication model because it's about the process of communicating. It's not about what we say, but how we say it. And his premise, which I think is revolutionary for personality, is that personality doesn't matter theoretically. It doesn't matter that we have different personality types until 2 or more people are trying to get something done. Then it matters a lot. And it only matters in as much as we're communicating with each other. If we never had any interactions, it wouldn't matter. But because humans communicate, personality must be understood through the process of communication. And so what makes this model different, first of all, is it's a behavioral model based on observable behaviors, not theories like some of the other ones. And second of all, it's about the observable process of how we communicate with one another. How's that going for you, Des?
Yeah, no, that's very interesting. That's very interesting, Nate. Yeah.
Okay. So what's that?
No, I don't know whether you can see me, but yeah, no, it's very interesting. Thank you.
Okay. There's another unique feature about PCM is people ask me sometimes, is it a model of communication or a model of personality? And I say yes, because personality is all about communication. So if we learn about personality, but we don't learn how to communicate with those personalities, what have we really accomplished? And so when I go into companies and they say, well, how is PCM different from the last 5 models that we've trained? The first thing I ask is, why did you go to the second model? And then the third one, and the fourth one, what happened there? And then the next question I ask is, well, will you show me how the models that you've learned are manifesting in observable behaviors in your culture? So if we go walk around, will you show me how people are talking to each other according to their personalities? Will you show me how your performance review and your incentive systems have been tailored to the motivational needs of each personality type? Can I see some of your memos that you've sent out to your organization and show me how the crafting of that memo, who are you speaking to? Who are you trying to reach by how you wrote that memo? And they really don't have answers for any of these questions. And I don't ask these questions as a setup. I ask these questions to illustrate that a good model gives you specific communication strategies to be able to identify and then adapt communication accordingly. That's why it was picked up at NASA to select and train astronauts for the space program, because not only is it so accurate and precise, but it actually allowed them to train the astronauts in how to talk to each other to keep each other in a good space. Because, you know, in the space shuttle, you don't have the benefit of putting an astronaut in timeout because they're having a bad day and they're in distress. All of the mechanical systems on the space shuttle have 3 or 4 levels of redundancy. If one breaks down, there's another one to back it up and another one to back it up. But you don't have three astronauts for each one that you can just pull out of the closet because they're having a bad day. Humans have to be able to talk to each other and keep each other going and keep our souls going. So what are these 6 types? And what did Dr. Kaler discover? Well, he discovered that there are all these behaviors that are correlated with these 6 clusters. And what he noticed was that these 6 types are actually present in every person. And so the next unique feature of PCM is that it's about types in people, not types of people. That's how we break free from this tyranny of stereotyping and labeling and putting people in boxes, by recognizing that all 6 types are in all of us. You know, Helen and Des and Claz and David and I, we all have arms and we all have eyes and we all have legs. We have all the parts in us. I don't come to you and say, oh, David, you're a head and I'm a leg. It's like, no, we all have all the parts and we all use them in an amazing concert to get things done. Now, I may have a stronger quadricep than David, and he may have a stronger bicep than me, and it all depends on how we're built and how we exercise and what we do every day. So when you get your process communication model profile and your structure, you will see that you have all 6 types in you. They're measurable and they're arranged in a preferred set order from your strongest one, which is called your base type, all the way up to the 6th floor, which is called your attic. And sometimes we call it the blind spot because those least developed parts in us, we almost forget that they're there. I did some yard work this weekend and I forgot that I had some muscles. And after doing a lot of bending, I was reminded I do have that muscle and it's very weak and it's very sore right now. I learned to respect it that afternoon. So these 6 types within us, that's significant when we're talking about issues like diversity and inclusion or empathy. Because if I have all 6 types in me, Helen, then I can find the strongest type in you by finding it in me first. And what it means is that you're not different from me, that there's a part of me that can connect with that part in you. And when I'm teaching inclusion, I'm teaching diversity awareness, and then teaching empathy, what I teach first is don't worry about that other person. First, find that part in you. Because you were built to have all 6 types. And when you can make friends with and appreciate and honor that part in you, you now can connect with them and you can appreciate that part in them. And so in the book, the character Kayla, she has a lot of little assignments that her mentor guides her to do. And one of them is to identify each of those 6 types in her and find someone in her life who is a wonderful role model of that type. And really epitomizes the beauty of that type in the world, but then also find that type in her and explain how that benefits her. So yeah, I may be a high D or I might be an introvert, but I also have all the other parts and they also are very important and valuable for me to be able to be successful and agile and effective in the world. So the first step for leaders, and I emphasize this over and over and over in the book, is first get to know you, get to appreciate and experience and energize and value all 6 types in you before you start to try to connect with other people. And there's timeless wisdom from many, many wisdom traditions, whether it's take the log out of your own eye before you try to take the speck out of your neighbor's eye, or, there's many, many traditions that say basically get your own house in order first before you go try to help other people. In the clinical world, it says hurt people hurt people. And so get your own stuff in order first, or you'll continue to do damage as you try to help people. I'm curious, I want to go into very specific, observable, identifiable parts of our personalities here, but I'm curious, what's your perspective on this idea of observable behaviors and that we have all 6 in us?
I can identify with that. So the in the coaching model, the personality model that I've used before, it talks about leveraging your strengths, and it talks about your preference to go to certain types of behaviors or ways of being. It's it's very much about, it doesn't mean you can't do the other stuff. It just means you prefer to do. And so I think that analogy about, clearing out the yard and going, ow, those are muscles that I forgot I had. It doesn't mean you can't do it. It just means you might have to be more aware. And I think that's the thing, isn't it? It's about making a choice. And so that's the thing about respectful connection, is you're making a choice to see that person and where they're coming from and meet them where they are. And so in that kind of empathy and connection will instantly create a much better relationship, because that person feels respected and feels heard.
Yeah. Well said.
Yeah, I feel that I think that with all of these kind of personality type assessments, they're always going to have their use for good in all their different ways. And what I found is that the more self-aware a person is, the more they work on their own self-development, they kind of see perhaps without explicitly knowing it, they can kind of see, okay, yes, I do have more of this than this, and I do kind of have my strength in this area and weaknesses in this area. But I think that the hope of this really is the fact that, you know, we all have a responsibility to develop ourselves. You know, yes, certain things come more naturally to us. We're more inclined to be, you know, of a more introverted or more extroverted, etc. If we're using that as an example. But otherwise, I do think that the beauty of this all is that it allows this development for us to actually develop, you know.
Beautiful.
Yeah.
Beautiful.
And that's exciting.
Well, these 6 types in us, they have names, but it's more important to understand them by how they communicate. The thinker part in us communicates using what we call the currency of logic. They make transactions that are rational, logical, attempting to stick with data, time frames, that things make rational sense. And you can tell by how they talk that that's important to them. The persister personality type conducts transactions using the currency of values. For them, it's about, is this relevant to what's important to me? And they're seeking to evaluate how things match up with their values and their convictions. The harmonizer type, which incidentally is the highest proportion in the population, has the currency of compassion, and they lead with this question: I don't care how much you know until I know how much you care. And they conduct transactions wanting to show compassion and nurture and care for people and connect at a feeling emotional level. The rebel personality type in us conducts transactions with the currency of humor. They want to have lively, upbeat, playful, fun interactions, and they wear their heart on their sleeve, and their language shows it, and their energy shows it. Often we say that they don't have a muffler because things are unfiltered when it comes out, but you know exactly where they're at with things. The promoter in us is the much more action-oriented, very focused and focused on getting where they want to go. And they use a lot of verbs because it's all about action. And it's all about cutting to the chase, taking action, and seizing the day. And then finally, the imaginer type, very commonly called the introvert, although there are other introverted types, conducts transactions through the currency of imagination. And for them, it's about that reflective time and space to soak it in and let things percolate. And they don't talk very much because they're allowing the world to come in and soak it in. So these 6 energies within us they all have signature character strengths. They all have their own styles of communication. They all prefer to be led in a certain way, and they all are motivated very explicitly by certain things. And finally, they all show very predictable self-sabotaging distress behavior if they aren't motivated in a proper way. And so one of the most beautiful things about PCM is it shows the one-to-one correlation between how we are motivated positively and how we sabotage ourselves through negative attention when the tank is empty. It's not guesswork, it's observable, it's reversible, and it's very sequential. And so those are the energies of the 6 types. I know we're going about 45 minutes. Is that right, David? Is that what your intention was?
Yeah, we've got, I mean, sort of, we've said 45 minutes, but, you know, sort of if it goes on a bit longer, then the idea was 45 minutes, then time for questions.
Great.
But
Great.
we've, I have to be honest, it's very rare that the webinars start. They generally start on time, but they don't often finish on time. So
we stop when there's nobody left, right?
Yeah. So when you're on your own, still talking, that's usually an indication that enough is enough. But
that's what my kids tell me.
Yeah, by all means, continue.
Okay.
And when we get to a point, we can ask everybody if they're willing to stay, and if you're willing to stay, then we'll go on.
Yeah. So the another unique feature of PCM, because it's a behavioral communication model, all of these types within us are not theoretical constructs. These are actual observable behaviors that evidence themselves through words, tones, postures, gestures, and facial expressions. And we teach in PCM training how to recognize that, and then how to adapt our communication, like Helen said, to honor that person and speak to that type in them. There's a lot of developmental psychology research that shows that the order of these 6 floors is pretty much set at birth, and it doesn't change throughout our lives. So this is not about your mood for the day or your temperaments today. It's really about a very durable, solid structure of personality. And it also, finally, it turns out that only one of those floors is correlated with how we're motivated. We're not motivated by 6 different motivators. There's only one at any given time in our life, and it's measurable and it's predictable and observable. And so when people learn about their PCM personality structure, they also learn, how am I motivated, and what does it take to fill my tank, and what will I do predictably if I don't get my needs met in a healthy way, which makes this an incredible coaching and leadership development tool to help people gain self-awareness so they can self-manage, and then in turn reach out to others in more healthy ways. So that's really the high points of how personality is conceptualized in this model, and some of the key features of the 6 personality types in each of us. I'll stop now and see what questions you have.
Yeah, not so much a question, but something, and I don't know whether you were going to cover this, and I appreciate that it's quite a deep aspect of it. But I think it would be useful if you could just run through a distress sequence for one of the personality types, because that understanding of moving from that I'm okay, you're
Sure.
okay to the different positions, I think so would be quite interesting for people to at least have a just a general understanding of.
Sure. Well, the second most developed part of my personality is called the thinker floor. It's also the floor in my personality at which I am motivated. So my natural character strengths for that floor is I'm logical and responsible and organized. I like to keep things in order. I'm very task oriented, and I structure time a lot. I'm motivated by recognition of my work and by structuring my time. So for me, when I feel like I have used my time productively, my tank is full. If I feel like I've not been able to be productive with my time, it's stressful for me. When my tank is empty, it's very predictable what I do. The first thing I do is I stop believing that everybody is okay, even though we're different. And I start thinking that I might not be okay unless I'm perfect. And I start to expect perfection in myself. And I start to raise the standards on my performance and my thinking ability to unrealistic levels as a condition of being okay. And it shows with how I talk. I over-explain, I go into too much detail, my emails get too long, I start having attachments and embedded links and bullet lists, and I go on and on. Everybody is listening to me going, oh my goodness, Nate, when are you going to get to the point? Because I'm trying to be perfect. Isn't it ironic that I value using time efficiently, but when I try to be perfect, I waste everybody's time? It's like karma. But if I go into deeper distress, instead of valuing my work and my time, I start to criticize everybody else's work and everybody else's time. And so I start saying things like, that was the stupidest thing I ever heard, or stop wasting my time, or can't you think, or, why isn't everybody working as hard as me? And I start to focus on how everybody else is not okay because they're stupid and lazy and wasting time. So I take the very things that I needed in a healthy way, and I now use them against everybody else. And as a result, I drive people away, and I end up the one more stressed out. It's very predictable, and the only way to get out is for me to realize my time is valuable, my work is important, and I don't have to take it out on everybody else. And I can regain my own value of my own time, my own value of my own work, and meet my own psychological needs in a healthy way, and ask for help from the people around me. And that's how it works. There's a very predictable sequence for each of the 6 types, but that's mine. And my team knows. Everybody sees it. We talk about it. It's very observable, and so it's not a secret.
Thank you, and thank you for your honesty. I can relate to a lot of that.
Sure.
But having a base thinker and face thinker as well. So, okay. So, questions from anybody?
Hi, Stephen. Welcome. Glad to have you. Claz, you had a question?
Yeah. So I'd have to study this a lot more. I'd have to really read into it. But there are 4 assessments that I usually use. Because I'm not actually accredited to use them, I don't try and convince my clients that, okay, this is their personality type. I only ever use it as, what is true out of this for you? What is there anything that you've learned from reading this? Would you agree? Would you not agree? I do kind of ask the clients, right, okay, what is true out of this or not? But I think that's one of the reasons why I haven't kind of committed myself to a particular personality assessment type, is because I do find, flaws in a lot of them. And actually, I do have an issue with kind of interfering with the freedom of the human being in front of me and saying, right, okay, I'm boxing you in this kind of way, with this personality type. So I have an issue fundamentally of somebody's kind of freedom to be able to sort of shape their life the way that they want to. So my question is really, how could I do the assessment? How could I get the test? Because I think that I wouldn't want to recommend something to my clients not having experienced it myself or done the assessment myself. And then secondly, is there an opportunity there with this model for my clients to kind of take a test and then they pay a certain amount of money to have a report developed or something like that? Or how does it work?
I really appreciate your healthy skepticism. And I also admire that it's really important that the client finds value and finds relevance in it. And the last thing we would ever want to do is tell them who they are. A model should open up possibility for people and have them asking better questions and help them accept themselves more fully. That should be the purpose. So to your point, yes, I would never go down the path of trying to interpret a profile unless you were certified and unless they were taking a validated assessment. And so there is a validated assessment for PCM. It's called the Personality Pattern Inventory. David's your guy to talk to if you're interested in how to obtain that. And it comes with interpretive reports. It comes in different formats that help people learn about themselves. A good PCM trainer will never try to tell somebody that their profile is accurate. Rather, the message is, if this helps you understand yourself better and helps open up new doors for you, then that's fantastic. And I have yet to, thousands of people I've worked with, and I have yet to find an exception where someone doesn't have experience when they look at their profile. It's not about limiting them. It's really about unlocking potential. And so, yes, use a validated profile. It's out there. It can be purchased. You would have to be a certified trainer in order to interpret and use the material, but certainly you could obtain your own profile and try it out.
Yes, thank you. One day I will commit to a specific sort of model. It's just right now I'm still exploring all those options and yeah. So
my father used to always say when I was growing up, he said, you should have your feet firmly planted in midair. So I've been trying to do that my whole life. But I know, Claz, you're the kind of person that when you commit, you will do it well and you will do it with everything you have. And so it's good to discern. Des.
Nate, listen, thank you for going through the 6 different floors. And I was just wondering, I was listening and taking a few notes as you were speaking. And the final note I took was that each person is motivated through just one of the 6 floors. Did I sort of summarize that correctly?
Absolutely. Very succinct.
So So I suppose what I'm wondering is that, okay, if you know what floor you're motivated through. So say you're talking to 5 of us here now. In terms of the way in which you find a way to, say, choose one of us, say me, for example, and maximize the communication with me in through your eyes, how like through this communication, or how do you go about understanding about me, and understanding, well, listen, what's the best floor to get through to Des on?
Mm-hmm. There's a concept in PCM called Perceptual Filters, and it's the concept that teaches what are the observable words that identify where someone's coming from in their personality. Okay. Words, tones, gestures, facial expressions. So I'm observing that all the time, and I don't always get it right, but I'm trying to pay attention. And then also, when people are talking, they are between the lines, they're telling us what's important to them. If someone asks a question and says, am I understanding this right? Or did I get it accurate? They're speaking the language of logic. They clearly want things to make sense, and it needs to fit for them. If someone says, you know, I'm not going to commit until, what they're saying is values matters to them. It has to be right with their value system. And commitment is a huge word for people that lead with values. So we're always giving evidence about what's important to us based on how we speak. That doesn't mean that's who we are. That just means that that's the energy at that moment.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah, you're right.
How long would it train up? How long would it take to train up in PCM, Nate?
Well, it depends. Before COVID or after? Before COVID, when we were meeting in person, we could answer your question in terms of number of days. And generally, start to finish getting certified as a PCM provider is about a 10 to 15 day process. There's about, I don't know, David, it kind of varies country to country, but there's prerequisite courses where you learn all the concepts and you practice them. And there's about a 5 to 7 day certification training where you are now demonstrating your ability to use the skills and learning how to teach the material using facilitator guides, and becoming a trainer and a teacher. So it's a long, it is a fairly involved process, but there are many different courses people can take, and across the world now, all of us are making these courses available virtually. Is that true for you, David? Are these courses available in your neck of the woods?
Yeah, sort of just based on what sort of John Parr, for those of you who sort of like who probably don't know, sort of like is the UK sort of like master trainer, and John has informed us sort of like about the requirements sort of like for what you can do and what you can't do, sort of like for virtual. But just building on what Nate was saying, class, if I go back to the program that I did, there's a 3-day, the program you learn to train is a sort of a 3-day program, or it can be 2 days or 3 days. And that teaches you sort of like more or less everything that Nate has gone through, and quite a chunk more, I think you would agree, Nate. And then what you do after that is you literally just put it into practice. And people will sit around the room and they will have their own sort of personality structures, and you will address them, and you will learn all of the different aspects of the value system, so like the words that they use, tones and gestures, as well as distress behaviors, driver behavior, and a whole host of things. And I came across it through work that I was doing, so with transactional analysis, and somebody just happened to mention, T.B. Kaler's process communication, and being, not that I knew it at the time, so like thinker base was, that sounds interesting, what's that? And what I found was that it's very similar to what Nate was saying. So it is an eye-opening model, and so I'm sort of accredited in about 10 different personality or 360 things. And what I found was that now, when I'm sort of like accrediting coaches, certainly sort of like at the senior and master level, more often than not, in my feedback will be something along the lines of, you might want to be looking up process communication, and here are some books that you might want to be reading, which now includes your book, Nate. This is now so like on my list of, you should be having a look at this if you're working in the leadership field. Simply because coaching models, and I accept that this is sort of like my own opinion, tend to teach that you follow something else, like Tigro or any of the other models. It doesn't necessarily say, yeah, well, that's great, but what if somebody's sort of like main communication style is not based on you going, well, what are the facts? And it's based on, look, just take a bit of time, just mull it over, think about it, and then bring it back to me. And it starts to get you to realize that it's not applying a coaching model to the individual, it's you working directly with the individual. And as Nate was saying, so like it's not pigeonholing, it's like really engaging at that level of of communication.
Yes, and I'm aware. Speaking of PCM, I'm doing a leadership profile here with 3 leaders that are tuning in here in 2 minutes, and we're going to talk through their profiles and help them understand it. But I want to leave in the chat before I go a link that I think could be really helpful. And it's about how to apply PCM to coaching. It's a blog article that I wrote, and I have a feeling that it could be something that would be helpful. It's free, you can read it, and a quick overview of the tips, what to look for to adapt your communication, all personality types as coaching clients. And it should give you enough information that you can start making some changes already. And I've put the link in there. I have to leave, and you can grab that link and it will take you, there's 2 parts and it covers all 6 personality types if you're interested.
That's great. Nate,
and you can always connect with me.
Thank you very much for your time. Just for those people very briefly, so like who want to purchase your book, where can they find that?
It is at seeingpeoplethrough.com. Seeingpeoplethrough.com. It's a website just for the book, and it has other resources and a couple videos and things. And you can actually hear the originator of the model, Tabby Kaler, talk about the introduction that he wrote and his work with President Clinton, his work with NASA, and some really cool stuff. So.
That's great.
Thank you all.
Thank you
Sorry,
much.
I got to rush off.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, please continue to stay safe and well.
Thank you. Will do.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye now.
Bye.
Okay, so for those of you who are remaining, it would be very nice if you just take a minute to mull over what you've heard and maybe come back with just 1 or 2 key points that are useful for you that you might take forward to either put into practice or just mull over. So I'll just give you a moment to think about that. Excuse my dogs going crazy in the background.
David, can I ask you a question?
Yes, of course you can, Helen.
Is this assessment for use particularly with teams, or is it also for individuals?
It was originally designed predominantly for individuals, and you can do what's called a composite team profile. Mm. So what you would do is everybody within the team would complete the personality profile, so they would have their own their own model, and then all of that information is then crunched into a team to give a generic team profile. Yeah. What's often useful when you're running workshops, especially when you're working with teams, is that they draw out their own profile on flip chart and then pop them on the wall, but don't put their names on them. So often they give them the facilitator and you hang them up, and then once you've given people a bit of an introduction to what the model is, you can then say, right, have a look around, whose profile is who type of thing, and then a bit like through the keyhole. and then get people to go, right, go and stand by your profile, and then start to talk about themselves, and what they notice and everything else. And what that allows you to do is to work quite deeply with the individual, as well as as working with the team and getting a sense of, is there a tendency to lean towards one area rather than another, or is it a full split? To give an example, it was an example I've used with a few people before. One of the personality styles, the ones Nate was talking about, the rebel, the person who likes fun, works on the basis of likes and dislikes. I ran a program once with around about 30 people, big team, big organization, and I had all of the individual profiles anyway, so I knew that there was a strong rebel communicator within the group, but I didn't know who it was because I hadn't met anybody yet. And this person came in, sat down more or less right in the center, went like that, and just had, "I'm here, entertain me, and entertain me now, and make it fun," written before they even spoke. And others, the imaginer that Nate was talking about, who will say things along the lines of, "It goes through my head." And it's funny because when you're going through the training, you've got the theory, but then when you start seeing it just unwrap itself really in front of you, you just have so many aha moments of I can just see that. And it also helps to explain why people don't get on with other people. It's not that they don't want to get on, it's just that there's something within that communication that they're just not connecting. And that part about the way that you say something is as equally important, if not more important, than what you say, is really that underpinning message within PCM.
Cool, thank you. It's hard, isn't it? Because the personality assessment tool I work with, I absolutely love, and to your point, Kath, is that thing that when you really believe in something, you have no problem selling it, because you see yourself. For me, when I talk to people, I listen to their words and I can probably work out their profiles. And so it's easy for me to kind of connect, because I can tell what's important to them and how they want to be communicated with. But all of this comes to the intent of the user, doesn't it? So if you go into a corporate world and they say, "We want to use this personality assessment," it's the why, really, and what are you going to do with it, and how do you commit to this on an ongoing basis, instead of just painting yourselves all up on a picture and going, "I'm this." What else are you going to do with it?
Yeah,
but
absolutely.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm mindful of time for everyone, so would anybody like to just make an observation of what they've picked up from this afternoon?
If I could make a comment, David, what I was, as I said before, I'm and as you know, I'm relatively new to this, but it was inspiring to hear that you've been using something like 10 different personality tools in the time that you've been coaching, and I suppose there's it opens a curious box in my mind. I know that there are various tools out there, obviously, and you use 10. How do you rate the PCM in that group of the 10 that you use?
The way that I would answer that is that I tend to look at assessments in a triangle, and the triangle for me looks at behavior, motivation, and interpersonal. So what we do, how we do it, why we do it. And if I had a choice, I would use the PCM model probably 9 times out of 10. So if it was my choice. And what I find is that the PCM model dovetails very nicely into other profiles, especially around leadership and executive coaching, because if you've got the, so like a 360-degree leadership assessment, for example, so Marshall Goldsmith's 360 or the MRG's LEA, so like, or the Leadership Challenge or anything like that, it tells you what people does. It doesn't tell you how well they do it, and it certainly doesn't tell you why they do it. So what you end up with is observation about, so like the behavior. What the PCM model adds to that is, this is what your behavior is within communication, and this is why you're doing it. And if you're not doing this, i.e. sort of, as Nate was saying, so like, you're like, if you start to move out of that I'm okay, you're okay position into either I'm okay, you're not okay, or for some of the other profiles, I'm not okay, you're okay, you can start to recognize not only that behavior, so like the way that people start to change, but you can also start to interject, right, in order to get people back into I'm okay, you're okay, this is the way that you need to communicate. And if leaders know that, as Nate said, so you're like, knowing like what your personality is fine, but it doesn't really make any difference until you come to use it with somebody else. Is the, you know, once that interaction starts, you then have that, okay, so, you know, we seem to be across, but what are this coming back from the people that I'm talking to? So an example of that might be that if you're going into a presentation or a workshop that you're going to be delivering, we all tend to base the initial sort of structure of that on who we are. So it's like, right, well, these are the things that I like, therefore this is the way that it's like, this is the way that I'm delivering it, because that's me. Rather than thinking, you know what, you know, there might be 6 other different personality types, you're like, or 5 if you include myself, within that room. So how can I communicate with each of those? You know, how do I, as Nate was saying, you know, that top floor, that attic floor for me is promoter. So like within my profile. So the just go out and do it, you're like, more or less, you're like walk over it. Trump is a promoter. You know, as an example, you know, picking somebody so like who may have been in the news recently. And you know, for me, that is, yeah, that's one of the hardest energies for me to get to, because it's just not my style. But, and this is the key part, if the person that you're talking to, if that is their strongest personality type and it's your weakest personality type, how do you communicate? And what PCM tells us is that within these 6 floors, we have the ability to go to any floor at any time, providing we know what the model is. In America, they call it a condominium. I tend to reference it as a department store. You know, go to your favorite department store. There's a floor there where you're happy to just, you like, spend time. But the different floors that you go up to, there's always one floor where you get out and you go, oh, you know what? No. Yeah, you're like, I'm going to go down. Yeah, I'm going to go down to something I enjoy a little bit more. So, you know, so for me, for example, if that was Harrods, you're like, my base floor would be the patisserie, and then my next floor would be the toy department. You know, that's definitely where I'm going. And it's like, and you have the ability to move so like up and down. There are a number of other books as well as Nate's book. There is one called Polyvoo Personality, okay, which is very much aimed at the coaching aspect. And then there is another one called Adaptive Communication. There is a very nice, there is a smaller book which was written for schools called Here's How to Reach Me. Here's How to Reach Me is a little bit outdated because they've changed a number of the, the personality, well, they've changed 2 of the personality profile names. But within that, within Here's How to Reach Me, there is a description of Goldilocks and the 3 bears. It's just a short snippet from each of, and when you read that, you can categorically see what the differences are. And I use that on workshops. I read that out as it, right, you know, which ones are these? And once you start to recognize that, as Nate was saying, so like once you start to recognize the language of currency, then, you know, just, you know, introducing something into a conversation like the harmonizer, for example, you know, the person who wants to be valued as a person, that key statement of, you know, before you say anything else, of just going up and saying, Joan, you're like, it's great that you're here. I always value it when you come here, because you always bring something to the group. Values that person, rather than just saying, you're like, hi, welcome, you're like, come on in, sit down, you're like, you'll find a folder there. And it's the little things that start to make sort of like a big difference. Sorry, that was probably a lot more information than you wanted.
No,
the other thing as well is that, and I can't lie about this, when I started sort of like learning sort of like their personality profiles and things, some of them I did when I was employed in an organization, so I was put through programs anyway. Some of the others, it was because I was swayed very easily by, oh, this is the greatest profile in the history of mankind, you've got to do this. Oh, right. And although so like I'm accredited in a lot, what I tend to find now is that I will allocate them depending upon what I'm working on. So if an organization wanted a culture and values assessment, there's only one that I would choose. If it was a leadership profile, there's only one that I would use. I would tag PCM in with that. If it was emotional intelligence, there's probably only one that I would use. Although I'm qualified in a couple, there's probably only one that I would use. And I think so. Like the other thing as well is that is always to ask people. So like if they've already done something in the past, you know, before you introduce anything or you start, have the conversation about, right, you know, what have you done? What came out of it? What did you learn? What did you apply? What didn't you apply? What didn't you like? What worked? What didn't work? Because if they've already done something, there's usually quite a lot of rich material in there. But it also gives you that avenue to say, well, look, there's a lot there, but what we can do, you know, with this other profile is, you know, we can explore these other areas if you want to. Because I'm a great believer in the expression, don't shoot the messenger, because I didn't fill the profile out, you know, so you're like you did. So I will always ask people, you know, like, you know, what's going on in your life now? You know, like what sort of things might have influenced the way that you completed the questionnaire? Where were you when you completed the questionnaire? I've, you know, like known people say, oh, I filled the, you know, the questionnaire in, so like on the 4:55 from Paddington, you're like at rush hour, so like you're like, because yeah, I had nothing else to do. Oh, so it was a quiet, you know, contemplative environment. No, right. So how accurate is this? Like, is this likely to be? And as Nate said, it's, you get some information from it, and as long as you've got that, you know what, you're like, how accurate is this? You know, from what you know about yourself, and this leans into self-awareness, how accurate is this from you? If you took this to your best friend or your spouse, or somebody that your spouse wasn't supposed to know about, you know, who knows you well, how accurate would they say that this profile was? And that's, you know, like when you can start to get people to go, well, yeah, you're like some things. And I've given feedback on a number of other profiles before, and the one thing that I always listen out for, which to me is always a red flag, is, oh yeah, that's me. Okay. Because I'm not interested in, oh yes, that's me. What I'm interested in is, what's the underpinning behavior, like, you know, what makes you you? And as another colleague of mine is very fond of saying, nobody knows what it's like to live in your own skin except you. Yeah, and that's, you know, so like that's what really, so like that's what profiles are there for. They're an aid to coaching. They are not the be all and end all. And these, as Nate has just so like said a couple of times, and I would absolutely endorse it, a little information, you know, like, is a dangerous thing, and you can't assume or even presume that, you're like, just because you've got this bit of information, this is where I would normally use both hands, that it's going to be, you're like, it's so like you're going to be able to use that to get this massive amount of, you're like, of information.
Okay. Thank you.
So before we again, so I think the thing that I said before. So I'm mindful of time because it's we're heading to 5:20 now. So just a couple of learning points or any final observations from anybody.
Yeah, when I do the sort of personality assessments, I tend to look at temperaments, character strengths, communication styles, MBTI, and interests. Those I would, kind of switch between those. But I think you summed up in three words what it is I'm trying to achieve, which is trying to understand their behavior, their motivations, and their interpersonal approach to all those things. And I think there was something that you said earlier, David, that really kind of made me think, well, hang on a minute, am I kind of doing this intuitively anyway? So I have a client, she's just started out with me a month ago, but I really sensed from one of the sessions that she's the kind of person who facts, I won't get buy-in from her using facts. She needs that time to kind of mull it over. And I really, really sensed that. And she fed back to me about 2 weeks later with this big list of things that she'd realized about herself actually and had thought about. And I just thought, you know what, that was just an intuitive act that I gave her the time, because otherwise I might have assumed that she would have had the buy-in through the facts. I was bringing a little bit of my communication style training into that. So I don't know, I think that when you mentioned that, it kind of piqued my interest, and I'm thinking, well, is this something that would fit in quite naturally with the way that I already coach and approach my coaching, really? So yeah, I think that it's worth further exploration, definitely. I would like to know, David, where I can find out more information based in the UK. If I was going to train up in this, where could I go for that? It sounds like you already have that knowledge, so perhaps I can probably pick your brains at some point.
Yeah, if I'm happy to have a separate Skype call on that. John, as I mentioned, so John Parr is the the master trainer, and that would be doing the full program. If you wanted to, or if anybody wanted to complete the personality profile itself first to get a general sense of what it is, what you get out of it, and everything else, then by all means contact me, and I can let you know what the process is for that, what the cost is and everything else, because I'm a certified PCM trainer, so I've been through all of the process.
Okay, brilliant.
Rigorously, would be with the word that I added on that. And I will honestly share that coming from a thinker base, which is all data, facts, and information. Trying to, when I first started to learn this, and I started, and by that I mean the training part of it, training into other people, I found it really difficult, because of just that trying to adapt. But by the time you've gone over it, and everybody who's interested in these programs are always really supportive. That is the one thing that comes out of it. Because all people want to do is to communicate, and I had a massive amount of fun, on the pro. And so by the time I got to the end of it, it starts to become, second nature, and you just pick up on, you pick up on little nuances, and you start to pick up on what's going on. With people, in the media as well, you just pick up on on the words that they use, or I would encourage you to watch people who are being interviewed. Maybe on the news, and just listen for those things, the pitch, the pace, the tone, the facial expressions, the body language, and just not so much to analyze who they are, but first and foremost make a comparison between different people. So especially when they're interviewing, as they've been doing lately, you've got the main newscaster, and then you've got a couple of other people that they're asking questions of, you can really spot little subtle differences, you know, within that, which might be like pauses beforehand, or like or big intakes of breath, or just the slowing down of the of the speech, or people who are just, you know, I described like somebody once as being like a Duracell battery, like on acid, because they were just the energy that they had was just incredible. And the importance of that is that if you've got somebody who's high energy coaching somebody who's not, you know, somebody has to move, you know, like otherwise it just, you know, like it just doesn't work. But yeah, it is really, really good fun. And in my filing system, so like on the computer somewhere, I do have the course, and so like when I eventually get around to it, I will put it online. But the IAPC&M tends to take up like quite a lot of my time. But yeah, so like, you know, like if you want to have so like a more in-depth conversation, so like then you're like, just drop me a line, so like, and we'll sort something out.
Thank you. Thank you.
Okay. Anybody else? Any other comments before I tell you what's going to happen next? That's my dog trying to sort of like dig its way through the door. Okay, so first and foremost, thank you very much, so like, for giving up your time this afternoon. I really appreciate it. There will be a recording, so you'll get an email at some point, which will let you know, so like, where the recording is, so that you can, you know, like, listen back to it at any point. As Nate mentioned, there is this, so like, the blog that's currently, so like, you're like in the chat. So if you haven't copied and pasted that, I would suggest you do. I've kept a copy of that as well. I have all of Nate's contact details. I only have one copy of his book, and normally I would say I'll send that to you, but I'm not going to, because I've scribbled in it. But I can also, so if you're interested in any of the other books that have been written around, so like process communication, there are also a number of videos. The one that Nate mentioned about Toby Kaler is well worth listening to. He's a very easy person to listen to, and the way that he explains the different personalities is quite endearing. Some of the other history, so like around NASA, so like is in, you know, like some of the other blogs, and there are a number of process communication model organizations as well as Nate, so like within the States. So like I can provide you know, links to their websites, because they've, you know, quite a lot of them have got some interesting information on, as well as John Parser, like within the UK. So other than that, thank you very much for your time. I truly hope that you remain safe and well. And if you have any questions, anything else, you're like, by all means, please, you're like, just drop me an email. And other than that, thank you very much. Hope to see you on a webinar in the future.
Thanks, David.
Take care, everyone. Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye
now.
Nice to meet everybody.
Bye, everyone.